Okay.
I'm gonna go like this
Alright.
instead.
Okay, that's fine.
But with LG&E, you can kind of get the idea that they're going to give you the electricity and gas, so you can live easier, so that you can give them your money so that they can keep giving you their power.
Bernheim is really eco-friendly, or not as eco-friendly as they can be.
Well, Bernheim has a conservation easement on it, and there's a lot of endangered species in Bernheim that are in the area where LG&E wants to run a pipeline through. When LG&E visited our classroom, they didn't really tell us anything about the pipeline. When Mr. Farmer asked, they said that was personal information.
Bernheim's angle is they want to conserve and preserve, because how do they know what they know? Why are they preserving and why are they conserving?
Probably studied a little bit what's around and looked around, as they own the land and they're probably trying to protect the land that they have. When LG&E came in, they told us they were trying to be somewhat eco-friendly, but they showed us a bunch of coal, and the coal ash is not good.
Well, to make this pipeline, LG&E will have to cut down a lot of trees, and trees, without a lot of trees, that could cause landslides.
What type of greenhouse gas are they really focused on right now? There's a certain thing that the entire world is trying to reduce. What is it? Go like this. What is that? What are you breathing out?
What
right now?
greenhouse gas is coming out of Miss Beck's mouth?
CO2.
Yeah. Trying to reduce this stuff right now. Hassan.
I have two things.
Please.
So they're trying to reduce CO2. I think I'm actually not 100% sure.
Okay.
My other thing is that this gas line that they're running through Bernheim, it's gonna cost a lot of money.
Why can't you just use natural energy sources like solar panels or wind turbines or something?
So Madeline's got us started on our big question up here. Is there a way to preserve a forest while also serving a growing community? Once you had your questions, how did you begin to answer those questions?
So what we did is we'd look at articles and we'd split into groups and do different things, and we'd go places and study, and yeah.
We got split up into a bunch of groups, and each person was assigned a different, area. There was the LG&E group, which was us. And there was the Bernheim group who went and interviewed Andrew Barry, and there was the community group who went to the country store and talked to locals. So the pipeline was originally supposed to go to Jim Beam Distillery.
To give them energy.
Yeah, to give them energy, but now, they're using biogas, so they don't need it anymore. So that group went to Jim Beam, not inside obviously,
Because
legal reasons, but
For me, so we have been talking a lot about environmental justice, and we read this article by Aaron Sexton in the Courier Journal about the what is happening at Bernheim, and I was really interested in it, and I wanted to know more about it.
There's not much that you by yourself today can do to protect the rainforests. I know it's hard, but there is much more that you can be doing in your own backyard to protect the forests in your city, around your city, because you actually have power in that area. Two main categories of consequences here. There is the ecosystem and biodiversity consequence, and then there is also the legal consequences. I'm not a lawyer, I don't study law, I study biodiversity. So I can talk a little bit more about those, and specifically the concern here is that we would have a pipeline running through a forest, and that can have a lot of negative consequences. The first one is that to develop this pipeline, they would need to cut down trees and mow down plants and cut through natural areas that are hosting native plants and animals in that area. And so that is going to potentially increase the risk of populations of plants and animals going extinct, which is a really large concern in this area specifically, because a lot of Kentucky has very big, thick soil. Okay, so the soil is really deep. There's a lot of nutrients in there, and it's really great for growing big trees, which is why we have a lot of big trees in the area. This area in particular, though, that this pipeline is proposed to go through, has a very unique type of soil. It's based off of different kinds of rocks underneath it. The soil is actually much more shallow, and so only certain plants can actually grow in that soil. And so this area is really unique in terms of Kentucky and eastern United States habitats. So there's only a certain subset of plants and animals that can actually live in this area. And for that reason, it's a very rare ecosystem. And so if we are to cut down that forest, we're going to lose even more of this rare ecosystem than what we already have. Yes, this is an issue of providing more energy needs, but in the end, this is a company trying to save money and putting profits over biodiversity. And I think that we've been doing that for the past 200 years, and it has to stop. Otherwise, there will be no more companies left to make profits. Because if we lose our biodiversity, we lose our life.
I think everyone can agree that we don't want this pipeline going through Bernheim because of all the destruction it could do and how many animals' habitats it could ruin.
What will happen underground?
Where?
In Bernheim, when the pipeline gets run through.
Okay, so we'll start off with tell us your name and what is your role at Bernheim.
Okay. So my name's Andrew Berry, and I am the Director of Conservation here at Bernheim Arboretum and Research Forest.
Okay. Can you tell us from your perspective what is going on between Bernheim and LG&E?
Okay. So the issue around the natural gas pipeline that's been proposed to go across Bernheim has been going on now for over 4 years. Bernheim has been protecting land around our border and trying to build wildlife corridors, trying to connect Bernheim up to some other protected areas and natural areas in the region. And that helps wildlife and plants kind of move between Bernheim and other places. And it helps nature be strong, and it helps nature to be resilient as areas around Bernheim are developed or habitat is lost.
Tell me more. What was it that we noticed at Bernheim in the forest that Bernheim's trying to protect?
There's a lot of ticks and snails.
Are they trying to protect the ticks or the snails?
Probably the snails.
Yeah. And so if LG&E comes and takes some of that land, will the snails still exist?
Yeah. Neither the snails or well, they would still exist, but it would be harder for them to exist.
What are some of the endangered species that will be affected?
That's a really good question. So in terms of endangered species that are going to be threatened by this pipeline, we know that it's going to impact some bat habitat, and that property was purchased with funds from the Imperiled Bat Conservation Fund. And that is a source of money that buys natural lands or supports projects directly for the Indiana bat and the northern long-eared bat. These are two federally endangered species which are found in Bernheim. They've been hit really hard from white nose syndrome, which is a disease that impacts them, but also habitat loss is one of the big problems that they've seen, especially in the greater Louisville area, where areas that they once lived have been disappearing. Wetlands that they used to use have been drained. So the bats are one of the big endangered species on the federal level, but on a lesser known level are some of the snails. There are two species of snails in that area. One is the hidden spring snail, and it's known from less than 5 locations in the world. And it's found right there in that creek that the pipeline's proposed to cross. And then there's the bluff vertigo snail, which is on a big boulder right there in the path of the pipeline. And it's known from less than 40 locations in the world. So really, really rare species, but overlooked because they're snails. The bluff vertigo and the hidden spring snail are less than 2 millimeters, so they're really hard to see. But size doesn't really come into a determination about rarity with wildlife, at least for me. And I think that the snails deserve the same protection that the bats should get, and everything else that lives over there.
Why does the pipeline have to go through Bernheim?
So the reason why they have the pipeline drawn through the section of Bernheim that we call the Cedar Grove Wildlife Corridor is because it's kind of the straight line that goes from where they want to connect up to another pipeline over to an area where there's a lot of development. And they've pretty much drawn a straight line in order to minimize the length of the pipeline. And they also see that section as being, a blank space on the map. Unfortunately, a lot of times, natural areas or places like Bernheim that are large and it's, relatively undeveloped, there's not a lot of people there. Infrastructure and utilities see those as an easy path for things like pipelines because it's a large block of one landowner, and so they don't have to go through a whole bunch of homes or smaller parcels, which would cost a lot more money. So yeah, there's issues around the distance, shortening the distance of what they want to run the pipeline, but also the cost of the land that they're trying to take to put the pipeline on.
So why do you think that it's a good idea for them to build the pipeline, or do you think it's not? And how will the pipeline affect the community?
That's a really good question. And so when you think about a project like a natural gas pipeline, you really, as you learn more about it, you see how connected it is to everything else that's going on in the community around you. And so coming down to Bernheim today, you all came down I-65, and you all probably saw how much growth is happening in Bullitt County. You saw a lot of new warehouses that have been built. You saw a new highway interchange. You know, there's a lot of growth happening in our community around Bernheim, and we're not necessarily opposed to that. We want growth in the community, and we want a healthy economy. But what we really want is for also to see conservation and nature, places like Bernheim, keep pace with that development. So whenever the development happens, I think that they need to take in mind that we're losing our natural areas so fast. We're losing the green space, not just within Bernheim, but around Bernheim. And they need to try to minimize impacts that would happen on Bernheim.
My name is Evan Patrick. I am the Natural Areas Manager for Bernheim. Does anybody want to guess what that means? Just shout it out.
You manage
That is the
natural
most
areas.
obvious answer, right? So, but what does that mean, right? You go ahead.
Like the natural areas stay natural and stuff.
That's a really good point. Yeah, one of the
natural
biggest
areas,
challenges
like
at
where there's not
Bernheim
this road.
is land protection, right? And that's kind of why we're here to talk about this potential pipeline corridor and what we're doing to protect that. I told you all a little bit about the pipeline. Did he tell you anything about the proposed pipeline route? Did he tell you that it could potentially go through Bernheim?
Oh yeah, he did.
Right?
He did tell us that.
So we're in Bernheim right now. This is the Cedar Grove Wildlife Corridor. And just behind us, this tree line, imagine 50 to 75 feet that way and removing all the trees from the top of that hill to the top of that hill over there. Let's step forward so we can see. And so what they would do, if this pipeline were installed, they would have to clear cut these trees in perpetuity. Someone tell me what perpetuity means. Perpetual, forever. That pipeline is in the ground until it is no longer profitable to this company, right? And they have to keep this clear cut as long as that pipeline is in existence. So imagine from the top of that hill to the top of that hill, 75 feet in that way, potentially cleared forever. Okay?
Evan, question
Yes.
for you. Actually, it's a double question. One, why can't they let this stuff grow back? Like,
So that's an issue. Can anybody, I'm going to ask you all that question. If there's a pipeline underground, right, and it's carrying crude like oil, right, why can't we let trees grow on top of it? Go ahead.
Well, they might, like, if the pipeline needs like maintenance or something, they could like block the pipe, like the trees could block the like bulldozers and things like that to like.
They couldn't get access to it,
Yeah.
right? That's one reason. Can anybody guess another reason? Yeah.
The tree list might cause damage to the pipeline.
That's right. Yes. So there are several reasons why it could be an issue. And the biggest one is what you just said, is that tree roots could damage this pipeline. And what does that mean, right? That means crude oil being spilled into this habitat. That's not good. Second part of your question.
Why not just use the space that's already
Sure.
been
So
cleared out?
when we purchased this land, this overhead power line was already here. This was installed in, I believe, the 70s. Don't quote me on that part. The company that owns this power line will not allow LG&E to put their pipeline underneath this power line due to safety concerns. As a matter of fact, the folks that operate this power line have publicly said that this is not, that the ground is not safe and is not stable enough to install a pipeline in this corridor. So that's a pretty interesting fact there. So, why do you all think it matters that we try to protect such tiny animals like this?
Because they are small.
They're not insignificant.
We took like a whole block to, you know, go and generate questions for, you know, interviews and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I don't believe we're gonna be able to get an interview with LG&E, which is bad
Why
news.
not? Why won't we get an interview with LG&E?
Well, they don't want to talk about, I don't think they want to talk about the pipeline, or like, it's like everyone knows about it already, but like they're not talking about it because I don't know why.
If there's a conservation easement on Bernheim, why doesn't it apply to LG&E?
That's a good question. So the conservation easement that we put on the Cedar Grove Wildlife Corridor, it has limitations. And when it was created, the whole concept of the conservation easement had to be passed by the state legislature. And they put a clause in there that stated that the conservation easement couldn't be used, and I don't know if this is exactly the right language, but couldn't be used to impede natural resource movement. While conservation easement hasn't been successful yet at stopping the pipeline, it's still gone a long way in raising the discussion around the issue, and also kind of spotlighting how conservation easements and other natural lands throughout the state are kind of at risk still from projects like this.
Could you please tell us your name and your connection with Bullitt County Pipeline?
My name is Danica Novgorodoff, and I've become involved with opposing the, the pipeline through Bernheim Forest. I'm involved with a group of concerned individuals and environmental groups who've come together to form what we're calling the Save Bernheim Now Coalition.
Can you tell us your perspective for what's happening with Bernheim and LG&E?
This pipeline is being built, first of all, through land that's unstable. It has a lot of sinkholes and landslide potential, so it's not a very safe place to build a pipeline. And the bigger issue is that we really do not need any more pipelines anywhere in this world because we've gotten to the point with the climate crisis where we really need to be moving away from any sorts of fossil fuels. That includes coal, that's oil, and that's quote unquote natural gas, which is actually fossil fuel gas. And we need to be moving toward renewable energy like wind and solar and geothermal and hydropower.
Why is what happens with the pipeline important to you?
It's really important to me for a lot of reasons. The number one reason being the climate change issue, that we just really need to create a sustainable future for everyone, ourselves, humans, as well as other species. We've had a huge loss of species in the last several decades, and we really need to stop that as soon as possible, preferably yesterday.
So what are your biggest concerns about the pipeline?
Well, my biggest concerns are first and foremost the climate change issue, of course. You know, in Kentucky, we've seen floods, we've seen big storms, you know, all over the country. We've seen hurricanes, we've seen fires, and things are really starting to get out of control with climate change. So that is really my big picture concern with this pipeline. And my more local concern is that there are a lot of endangered species that are living here, and we need to protect the species, that, especially the ones that are endangered or threatened. And Bernheim Forest is a really special place because it's a huge amount of land that different species use as habitat, and it's the largest uninterrupted piece of land in this part of the country. So we need to protect it from being severed by infrastructure like pipelines.
What do you think it would take to stop the pipeline going through Bernheim?
There are a lot of ways it might be stopped, and that's why me and my the group that I'm working with, the Save Bernheim group, is trying to put a lot of public pressure on different organizations and on LG&E to stop it. You know, it's a long shot, but LG&E could decide that this is a bad idea, and they could decide we're not going to build this pipeline. They could make the right decision. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's possible.
How can others help if they are interested?
There's a lot of ways so that people can get involved, from things like writing letters. You can write letters to the governor. We have a website that's savebernheimnow.org, and you can find people's addresses to write letters to. You can contact directly LG&E and tell them that you're opposed to this pipeline. You can show up at some future protests that we'll be planning. And you can get on the email list to find out about upcoming events that will be opposing the pipeline. And you can, this is kind of the best way to start getting involved, is asking questions like you are, to find out more and get really informed about the issues and the complexity of the issue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Outside of the problems that Bernheim is facing, what is your perspective on this issue of conservation versus energy needs?
Yeah, so my perspective on conservation issues versus energy needs is that it's actually not a versus. We can conserve our environment and we can have the energy needs met.
What is your perspective on climate change? It
sounds very scary when you think about it, when you start learning the facts about it, and the fact that more than 99% of scientists agree that we need to very quickly turn around the way that we are operating in this world and the way that we use energy. So it's a big thing that we need to tackle, but the exciting thing is that we have the technology, we know how to do it, and if we can just get broad public support and the people who are in positions of power to change and to decide that this is the most important thing that we need to do, then we can do it. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity, I think. I actually lived at Bernheim Forest for about 6 weeks. I was a writer in residence here, and so I lived in a cabin here, and I really developed a relationship with this place. I think I felt like I kind of developed almost a spiritual relationship with the forest here. And a lot of people will say, like, what's the connection between spirituality and climate change and science and politics? And I think it really is. There is a connection, because if people feel like they're not connected to the land and they're not interconnected with other people and with other species, then they lose this sort of moral sight of what we need to do in terms of environmental stewardship.
Outside of the problems that Bernheim is facing, what is your perspective on this issue of conservation versus energy needs?
So that is a really tough question. So conservation and energy needs have always kind of been at odds. We want to make sure that conservation doesn't get overshadowed. We know that we're losing a lot of natural land every day here in the state of Kentucky, as well as across the nation and the world. And we need to do a better job of appreciating the value that comes from natural areas like Bernheim. You really can't put a dollar on clean air and clean water very well. Some people are trying to do it. But I think if you could appropriately put a value on it, then you would see that the conservation value of places like Bernheim is just as important and just as valuable as the energy needs.
There is going to be LG&E proposed this natural gas pipeline to go through a non-public part in Bernheim, and so in that area it would take up 8 acres of land, and there are a lot of endangered species in that area, and the pipeline is going to come here for more energy over here because of the growing community.
Is that going to disrupt where all the animals are at?
Yeah, probably. So how do you feel about the proposed natural gas pipeline?
I don't like the idea they're taking up so much. 8 acres is quite a bit. And I don't like them messing with the animals.
Yeah. What do you think the consequences of building this pipeline are?
I understand they may need it, but they should probably investigate maybe some other areas besides that.
What do you think the consequences of not building this pipeline are?
Well, if they don't build it, I mean, they could find another place besides Bernheim Forest.
Yeah. How will the pipeline affect you or your community?
Sad thing about it, I live in Fairdale, Jefferson County.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to affect me too much, other than when I go to visit Bernheim Forest.
Yeah.
Can you tell us from your perspective what is going on between Bernheim and LG&E?
All I know is what I see on the news, and I don't think there needs to be a pipeline through the forest. Leave it alone.
What do you think the consequences of building this pipeline are?
The wildlife, I mean, we need our trees, we need our forests, we need our wildlife. I mean, go build it somewhere else.
Do you know of anyone who will be affected by the new pipeline?
The animals.
Yeah. Would you change the situation? If so, what are your solutions?
Build it somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. What are some solutions to the problem of balancing energy needs with conservation?
So some of the renewable energy sources that are being proposed could go a long way at helping some of these issues around conservation. One of them is, obviously solar, finding creative ways to put solar panels on structures or in other areas that aren't wildlife habitat. We don't want to see habitat lost for like these big solar farms. We want to see them be put in strategically in places where it'll benefit the growth and development without having to destroy a bunch of green space. We've all got to reduce the amount of energy that we use, and that just finding new renewable sources and continuing to use on the same level, it's not going to add up in the long term.
What would you tell students your age that notice something happening in their community? How would you encourage them to take on an investigation like you guys did?
I feel like it's like there's a lot of there was a lot of research put into this, but I feel like the eventual thing that you have to do is just act. Like the research is for nothing unless we actually go to Bernheim and get interviews and make this documentary that we're making. And I feel like if you stand up for whatever you believe, and you can make a difference.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.